What does Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Leland Stanford, Andrew W. Mellon, and James Duke all have to do with each other?
Give it to me, give it to me.
Welcome, YouTube. I have a quick question. What does Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Leland Stanford, Andrew W. Mellon, and James Duke all have to do with each other or this episode? Well, if you don't know the answer, I'll tell you. The answer is these men made America what it is today, and they lasted throughout the test of time. Hundreds of years, might I add. And the reason why I bring this up is because I was watching randomly, I was on YouTube University, and I was watching a documentary on John D. Rockefeller. And there was so much I didn't know about John D. Rockefeller. And another point I want to add before I go into this story about how this all comes together, but all of these men were known as Robert Barons. I believe that's the name. Robert Barons. And I'll put a description of what that means. But all of these men were Robert Barons. And all the men I named did not come from money. But we know their names to this day. In fact, they're arguably the wealthiest men to live. I'll break down what they did. Andrew Carnegie, he's known for his steel in Pittsburgh and New York. Then you have James Duke, known for tobacco and energy in Durham, North Carolina. Then you have Andrew W. Mellon, finance and oil in Pittsburgh. J.P. Morgan, of course, everybody knows Chase, finance and industrial consolidation, New York. Then you have John D. Rockefeller, known for oil, Cleveland and New York. You have Leland Stanford, Stanford, Stanford University, can't forget that. Leland Stanford, known for the railroads in San Francisco, California. Then you have Cornelius Vanderbilt, known for water transportation and railroads in New York. So, great men, great gentlemen, long list of gentlemen, long list of greatness. And it kind of motivates me when I think about their story and how you think of where they come from. Again, they don't come from money, but yet they lasted the test of time, hundreds of years, in terms of wealth, generational legacy. And it's kind of very empowering to look at the story and be like, wow, how is this possible? How did this start? And how can this happen again? And then it brought me back to Robert Kiyosaki's book, Second Chance. And in that book, he mentions the levels and errors of wealth. And he actually breaks them down because he mentioned the errors, different errors of wealth. And the different errors are the hunter-gatherer era, you have the agrarian era, you have the industrial era, and lastly, you have the informational era. Now we're currently in the informational era because, again, you have the hunter-gatherer era, the agrarian era, the industrial era, and the informational era. And that's just the third era. So we're now in the fourth era, which I believe we are now in the greatest time ever, because if we study history, we can see that if you add value, if you see something where you could make better, but even better than that, we see a transition. When I look at the different eras of wealth, I'm seeing a transition of not only power, but a transition of how things once were to how things are now being done. And people that are able to see that, they're able to capture the benefits in a major way. So I think now is not only the time to buckle down and study the new technology, the new realms of information and how it's getting around, how it could be capitalized. Because again, real estate is now digital when it comes to the new era that we're in. I'll break down the eras right now so you guys know. From Second Chance in Robert Kiyosaki's book, he mentions the four eras of wealth being the hunter gatherer era, which is the era of the chief of the tribes did not, I call it the era of true communism because everything was equal. The chief of the tribes lived in no separate hut, cave, or tent than anyone else. All right. If he got sick, he did not go to a separate hospital. His kids simply did not go to any separate schooling system. And on top of that, real estate had no value whatsoever. So if things were bad with, like, let's say, food became scarce, right? Meaning, uh, hunting season and the things that they were hunting, it was getting real scarce, or the weather was getting very bad. They just simply got up and moved. The true definition of nomads, right? Real estate had no value, so nothing mattered. They just got up and left. After that era, it was then the Argarian era. And that era was when people really started to domesticate animals, and then they also started to plant crops, right? So now, because they needed protection, you had the eras of kings, and you have the era of now people needing to pay taxes because you have two different classes now. You have the rich and the poor is now created. The rich being people that own land, the poor being people that did not own land. Now that you're paying taxes, the kings are able to. And why would people pay taxes? Well, they pay taxes for the privilege to not only work on these lands but also live on these lands, right? And to keep the people happy, what the king will do is he will give his friends little pieces of territory and lands, and he called those friends bearers and lords. And this is where the term landlord comes from, right? And this is, again, two classes now, the rich and the poor. And you have the landlords and you have the bearers here. Uh, Real estate is a Spanish term that stands for royal estate. You have peasant, which is a French term that stands for person of land. So all of these terms come into play now because real estate is now valuable, right? This is the first time in history where real estate is now valuable. People need protection from other kings, so they're also paying tax for that. um, and this was just that era, right? But the third era is the industrial era. And this is the era where people did not need agriculture or cultivated land to necessarily make a lot of money. All right. This is the era where somebody can go to a rocky, unagricultured, cultivated land, which is now known as Detroit, and create the automobile factory. And if you have not guessed, yes, I'm speaking of Henry Ford. This is the era of Henry Ford and all of those people I mentioned early on. And these people actually became a new type of royalty. This is where you had the bankers and you had the industrialists. This is what they were called. And because they were so powerful, they even had a name in the 19th century called robber barons. And they mostly didn't come from money, right? The robber barons, people say this is the era of greed, and they're right. The reason they're right is because this is the era where opportunity was available and people were now in position to become a lot wealthier than the previous kings and queens of the Argarian era. So again, this is where you have the Henry Fords, the John D. Rockefellers, and you have everybody like J.P. Morgan that took advantage of not only capitalism and monopoly, and there's a lot to say about that because in the video they kind of had John D. Rockefeller as like the big bad guy who kind of made everybody use his oil. Now, there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of con to that. You could say that John D. Rockefeller pulled a monopoly game, but he didn't force anybody to sign to him or use his oil. But what he did do, he made oil prices cheaper than his competition and forced a lot of people just out of business. But on the opposite side, because you gotta flip two coins, what I'm noticing, you have to really look at both sides. He did save a whole whale industry because kerosene oil, he was able to get it so cheap that people stopped using the oils from the whales. And also people that was working late at night that once wasn't able to work at night because they needed the oil for their lights and their kerosene for the lanterns, they were now able to afford to use the oil in their lighting to work at night to provide more for their family. So yes, John D. Rockefeller monopolized oil industry in some way, but he also made oil a lot cheaper for the average American. So you have your gifts and your cons. So you have to take it with a grain of salt and look at everything. And then you have like the Vanderbilts who really just necessarily just made transportation a lot easier for everybody. He was the one that is kind of the reasoning why people were able to eat and travel and stuff like that. So anyway, let's not digress. That's the industrial era. After this era, you now have, which is today, you have the informational era. I truly believe this is the greatest era, the greatest time ever to be alive because you have your new robber barons. You have the people that understand that. Before we get into that, did we go into the three classes that was created because of the industrial era? This is where you have the rich, the middle class, and the poor. The middle class enters into the scene during the industrial era because of those factories. Because you had those factories that was able to be built in those areas that weren't really needed for agriculture or cultivating land, people were then able to become lords of their own land by purchasing houses. Now the kings in the Argarian era started to see it was a shift happening into the industrial age. So what they did is they started to sell pieces of their lands and became bankers. And they started to sell some of those pieces to common people in the terms of mortgages. To this day, mortgages are one of the most and biggest purchases or investments for the middle class. And for the poor class continues to pay their rent to landlords to this very day. Now, I want to also mention that in 1906 or 1903, 1903, I'm an alpha file, so 1906 is what I always think about. But 1903, I want you to understand that John D. Rockefeller created the General Board of Education. Now, a lot of people say he created the educational system because he needed people to work the factories for what he was creating in the industrial era. So, a lot of people can argue that the education system was never made to make the poor and middle class rich at all. It was really made to sustain the wealth of the rich. But that's a whole nother topic. I just want you to understand right now we are in the informational era, which is the era of the new robber barons, which is the era of the Mark Zuckerbergs with Facebook. You have the Jeff Bezos with Amazon, the Michael Dells with Dell. You have the era where the new real estate is now digital. We have more information available ever thanks to platforms like YouTube, Kajabi, Coursera. Um, there are so many tools available right now that I believe with the proper coding, proper technology, proper salesman skills, you are now able to now reach an audience that you previously never would have reached, but you now have the access and the artillery at your disposal to become greater than you have ever became. So these are one of the reasons why I believe now's the greatest time ever for you to become wealthy, but you also have to understand how this wealth gap even works and how it came about. And once you understand the history and the eras of wealth, and you understand where you are today, you understand how to take advantage of it and understand you are in this time for a reason. And that is why I believe now is the best time to get rich and wealthy, break generational curses, and build generational wealth. Real estate is not what it used to be. Money is no longer what it used to be. Currency is no longer what it used to be. So, with that being said, take advantage of this time. And now, on this segment of the Uncle Dre Show, we have wise words from a wise man. Caleb, give us some wise words for today.
All right. So this is gonna be my little nugget that I got for you, real quick, because I got this idea. I just need to flush it out real quick. And I was telling a story, and I was about to go into something. I was like, you know what? Let me get it on. Let me get it on the record. You know what I'm saying? All right. So been thinking a lot. You know, like it's so crazy right now. The cost of capital and the cost of debt. It's just the cost of everything right now is crazy. And so, yeah, it's just so crazy right now. So I'm like, yo, my lease. So I got a lease, and I got a car. I'm leasing this car. I got it right before the pandemic, and well, after during the pandemic, and it was great. You know, had a lease, had a little car. I'm rolling, and I'm good. I write off the payments. But now my car is about to. I have to it's about to expire, and I have to give the car back. And I'm trying to figure out, what do I do? Do I get another car? What do I do? And I'm like, yo, I go to the dealership, and I'm like, yo, it's mad expensive for a car. They talking about, I went to go price out a range. Motherfuckers talk about like, yo, payment's gonna be like $4,500. I'm like, what? That's more than the freaking Lamborghini truck 2 years ago. So, you know, I'm like, yo, freak that. I don't need a car. Now I'm gonna get a hoopty. Because what I realized, I feel like, yo, people should be saving all their cash right now, because the value of cash is stronger than the cost of debt at the moment. So if you ain't got no money in the bank, you are screwed, because there's going to be a ton of opportunity hitting the streets. And if you're not well prepared, then you're going to be missing out on a lot of deals. So I think I'm shifting because of the economic environment right now, I'm shifting my mindset to go from, all right, I don't need these material things right now. I'm going to cut my expenses. I'm going to try to stack up as much as I can, because there is going to be more opportunity in the street, and I don't want to use debt. When you use debt right now, that don't make no sense. All the credit cards, companies are charging about 20% interest rate on credit cards. That means they're making money on you. Whatever you like, let's say your bill is $1,000. By the time you finish paying it off, they probably made $3,000 or $4,000 on you, because that's the way it works with interest rates and math. So I'm just saying right now, I think everybody should be cashing up, saving every penny, and waiting for the next opportunity to hit. So that's my one quick nugget for tonight, and just wanted to express my thoughts.
Thank you, Caleb, for those wise words. That was our segment, Wise Words from a Wise Man. Caleb, I'm sure the people appreciate those wise words as much as I did. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for your time. If you have not already, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share if you got any value from this episode of the Uncle Dre Show today. Remember to be blessed by the best, and I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.